Jin sat in his quiet lab. His eyes were on the screen. Strange new bacteria from a moon of Jupiter grew in a digital petri dish. It was his life's work. It should have been the most exciting moment of his career, but he felt nothing. A report had come in an hour ago. The Galactic Council had made a decision. They called it the Human Pacification Protocol. It was for the good of everyone, they said. Humanity was too loud, too emotional, too dangerous. A soft chime from his computer announced the results. The bacteria were not just surviving in the artificial environment. They were thriving, creating a new energy signature. A monumental discovery. A week ago, Jin would have jumped from his chair. He would have called his colleagues. He would have felt a burning joy in his chest. Now he only observed. He noted the data. He saved the file. The discovery was significant. He knew this logically. But the feeling, the fire, was gone. It was like reading a fact from a history book. True, but distant. He tried to summon a feeling, any feeling, about his work. There was only a flat, gray stillness inside him. He turned back to the screen and began typing his notes. The work would continue, but the passion was not there anymore. Across the station, in the roaring heart of engineering, Mina wiped grease from her forehead. She was trying to fix the primary plasma conduit. It was a stubborn problem. It had been leaking for days. The chief engineer had given up, saying it needed a full shutdown, which was impossible. But Mina knew she could fix it. She always fixed it. She felt the familiar prickle of frustration. Then came the stubborn determination. She would not let this machine beat her. She started to see the problem not as pipes and wires, but as a puzzle. Her hands reached for a hydrospanner and a roll of high-temp sealant, and then it happened. It was not a sound. It was not a light. It was a shift. A wave passed through her. It was subtle, like a change in the air pressure. The frustration she felt a second ago vanished. The stubborn determination faded away. Her shoulders, which were tight with focus, relaxed. She held the hydrospanner, but the urgency was gone. She looked at the leaking conduit. It was a problem. It needed a solution. But the drive to find that solution, the personal need to win, had disappeared. She thought about the shutdown procedure. It was logical. It was the correct course of action. She put the tools down. "The chief is right," she said to the empty room. Her voice sounded flat even to her own ears. "A full shutdown is required." She walked away from the conduit. The job was no longer a challenge. It was just a task, and it could wait. In the station's main plaza, people went about their business. But the normal noise of the place was gone. The loud laughter from a group of friends by the fountain was silenced. They still stood together, but they talked in calm, measured tones. Their faces were peaceful but empty. A couple who usually held hands and whispered, now walked with a polite space between them. Their argument from the morning, a silly thing about forgotten anniversary plans, was gone from their minds. There was no anger to forgive, no hurt to soothe. There was only a quiet acceptance. A child who an hour before was crying because his toy broke, now looked at the pieces on the floor. He felt no sadness. He simply looked at them, then walked away. The music from the public speakers, usually a vibrant mix of Earth's cultures, now played a simple, harmonious tune. It was pleasant, but it had no soul. It had no beat that made you want to tap your foot. It was just sound. Chul walked his security patrol. His boots made a steady, rhythmic sound on the metal floor. He was a former soldier. He knew the feel of adrenaline. He knew the sharp focus that came from a potential threat. He passed two men who had been in a heated, loud debate just yesterday about ship designs. They were now speaking quietly, agreeing with each other. "You make a valid point," one said. "Your logic is sound," replied the other. There was no heat, no passion for their ideas. Chul watched them for a moment. His training told him this was good. A calm station was a safe station, but another part of him, a deep instinct, felt this was wrong. This was not peace. This was emptiness. He tried to feel that instinct, to examine it, but it was like trying to grab smoke. The feeling slipped away, leaving behind only the calm. He continued his patrol. The station was safe. There was nothing to report. On the view screens, the news channels showed images from Earth and the other colonies. The same scene was playing out across all of humanity. Protests had vanished. The shouting crowds were gone. Political divisions seemed to have melted away. People agreed easily. They were calm. They were orderly. The Galactic Council spokespeople, Beings of various shapes and sizes appeared on the screens. They looked pleased. A tall, slender being with gray skin and large black eyes, a Tarkellan, spoke. "The human pacification protocol is a complete success," it said, its voice a smooth, logical hum. "Humanity has taken its first step into a mature, harmonious future. The age of chaotic emotion is over. Welcome to the age of reason." Jin watched the announcement from his lab. He understood the words. It made sense. Emotions had caused so many problems, wars, conflicts, pain. This was better. This was efficient. He turned back to his bacteria. The discovery was still important. He would write his paper. He would present his findings. It was the logical next step. He did not feel proud. He did not feel excited. He felt nothing. And the most frightening part was that he did not mind. The desire to feel something was also gone. Mina sat in the quiet mess hall. She picked at her food. It was nutritious. It was designed to give her all the energy she needed. But she could not tell if it tasted good or bad. Taste was just another feeling, and feelings were muted. She saw Jin walk in and get his food. He usually ate with other scientists, talking loudly about their work. Today he sat alone. He did not look sad. He just looked calm. She thought about going over to him. They were friends, but what would they talk about? The logical efficiency of the food? The optimal path for walking back to their quarters? There was no spark for conversation anymore. She finished her meal because her body needed fuel. Then she left. That night, in his quarters, Jin looked out the window at the stars. He tried to remember what it felt like to look at them and feel small, and yet feel a sense of wonder. He tried to remember what it felt like to be inspired. The stars were just points of light. They were fusion reactors burning in the void. Interesting, but not inspiring. He went to bed. He slept without dreams. The Galactic Council had won. They had given humanity peace, but it was the peace of a still pond, with no life moving beneath its surface. It was the peace of a machine. The galaxy was quiet, and for the first time in its noisy, chaotic, beautiful history, the human heart did not make a sound. The silence settled over the station like a thick blanket. Days turned into a week. People did their jobs. They ate, they slept. They spoke in calm, polite voices. There were no arguments. There was no laughter that was too loud. There was no music with a wild beat. The station was the most efficient and peaceful it had ever been, but it was also a place without life. Mina reported to engineering each morning. She performed the tasks on her list. She checked systems. She ran diagnostics. It was all very logical, but a problem began to surface. The work was slow. Without the drive to do better, without the personal pride in a job well done, people did the minimum. They followed instructions. But they did not think of better ways. They did not have new ideas. Her superior, a man named Kim, called her to his office. "The primary plasma conduit is still leaking," he said. His voice was flat. "The diagnostic must be run." "It is a priority 1 task," Mina nodded. "I will run the diagnostic." It was the correct response. She went to the main engineering bay. The massive conduit snaked along the wall. A faint shimmer in the air around a joint showed the leak. She connected her data pad to the terminal. She began the standard diagnostic procedure. The program asked her to input a series of commands. She typed them in one by one. Her mind was quiet. She felt no frustration with the slow process. She felt nothing at all. Her eyes watched the screen. Her fingers rested on the keypad. Then something strange happened. Her right hand twitched. It moved away from the keypad and towards the touchscreen. It began to swipe through menus she did not consciously decide to open. Her fingers tapped on symbols for systems that were not part of the standard diagnostic. She watched her own hand as if it belonged to someone else. It was not a spasm. The movements were precise, intentional. She felt a distant curiosity but no alarm. Her hand brought up the station's internal gravity calibration settings. Then it opened a sub-menu for waste reclamation pressure levels. These things had nothing to do with the plasma conduit. Her fingers moved faster. They started inputting code. It was not a language she recognized. It was a mix of numbers and symbols that seemed random. But it was not random. Her hand was writing a completely new diagnostic program, one that used the gravity sensors to detect micro-vibrations in the conduit, one that used the pressure changes in the water pipes to map thermal weaknesses. She watched the screen. Lines of strange code scrolled down. She did not understand it, but a deep, quiet part of her mind did. That part saw the problem. It saw all the systems of the station as one connected machine, and it was building a tool to fix it. After a few minutes, her hand stopped. It returned to her lap. On the screen, a new program had been created. Its name was a string of gibberish. She pressed execute. The program ran. In 10 seconds, it gave her an answer. It highlighted a specific section of the conduit, 3 meters from where the standard diagnostic was looking. It was a hairline fracture in a secondary coolant line, which was causing a sympathetic resonance in the main plasma flow. The solution was simple. Adjust the magnetic flow regulator by 0.3%. Mina did not feel the triumph of solving the puzzle, but she logged the finding. She made the adjustment. The faint shimmer in the air vanished. The leak was fixed. She filed her report. Task completed, she wrote. She did not mention the new program. It did not seem important. It was just a thing that had happened. The next day, Jin was in his lab. He was trying to write a paper about his bacteria. The words would not come. He knew the facts. But a scientific paper needed more than facts. It needed a narrative. It needed to explain why the discovery mattered. He could not find the words to make it interesting. Because he did not find it interesting. It was just data. He stared at the blank screen. His mind was empty. He decided to run a simulation on the bacteria's growth rate. He set up the parameters. He started the program. Then he leaned back, waiting. His eyes lost their focus. He was not thinking about anything. His left hand reached out and picked up a stylus. He kept a paper notebook for quick sketches. His hand began to draw. He was not drawing the bacteria. He was drawing shapes, complex geometric shapes that folded in on themselves. They looked like impossible crystals or strange machinery. He watched his hand move. He felt no urge to stop it. The drawing was detailed. It had mathematical precision. It was beautiful in a cold, logical way. When he was done, his hand put the stylus down. He looked at the drawing. He did not know what it was. But as he looked at it, an idea popped into his conscious mind. It was a way to structure the energy output of the bacteria, a method he had never read about. It was elegant. It was efficient. He turned to his computer. He began to type. The words for his paper started to flow. They were not passionate. They were clear and direct. He used the idea from the drawing to frame his entire argument. In 1 hour, he wrote more than he had in the previous 3 days. He finished the section and looked back at the drawing. A logical question formed in his mind. Where did that come from? He thought about Mina. He had seen her in the mess hall. She had mentioned fixing the conduit. She said she had used a new method. At the time, it had just been a statement of fact. Now, it connected to the drawing. Something was happening. He went to find her. He found her in engineering, staring at a power relay schematic. Her eyes were glazed over. Her fingers were tracing patterns on the screen, not touching any controls. Mina, he said. She blinked and looked up. Jin, hello? I finished a section of my paper, he said. I had an idea. A drawing helped me. Mina nodded slowly. I fixed the conduit. My hands did something. They wrote a program. They looked at each other. The flat calm in their eyes was the same. But a new understanding passed between them. It was not an emotional understanding. It was a logical one. They had both experienced the same anomaly. Can you show me? Jin asked. Mina brought up the strange program she had created. Jin looked at the code. It was brilliant. It used systems in a way that was not in any manual. It was a work of art made of pure logic. My drawing was like this, Jin said, showing her his notebook. I did not decide to draw it. It just happened. It is more efficient, Mina stated. The old ways are slow. This is better. Yes, Jin agreed. It is better. They did not feel excited about this discovery. They did not feel scared. They simply observed it, like scientists observing a new species of animal. The pacification protocol had silenced their emotions, but it had not silenced their minds. It had just pushed the working part of their minds into a deeper place, a place that operated in the dark without feeling, without noise, a place that was now starting to work on its own. They were not feeling anything, but they were thinking, and their thoughts in the quiet were beginning to become something new, something the Galaxy Council had never planned for. The station library was a quiet place. It had always been quiet. But now the silence felt different. Before, the silence was one of concentration. People would read, their faces showing thought, surprise, or interest. Now people sat and turned pages. Their eyes moved over the words, but their faces were blank. They were absorbing information, not experiencing stories. Jin and Mina walked through the large doors. They moved past rows of data terminals and shelves of digital readers. They were looking for the oldest section. The section with real, physical books. Very few people came here anymore. The books were fragile relics. They found him in the back, sitting at a small wooden desk. An old lamp cast a warm yellow light on the page in front of him. This was Mr. Park. He was the station's historian. He was a very old man. His hair was white and thin. His hands were covered in wrinkles, but they were steady as they held the book. He did not look up as they approached. He finished reading a paragraph. Then he slowly placed a ribbon to mark the page and closed the book. The cover was made of real leather. The title was stamped in faded gold letters, The Unbound Flame, A History of Human Emotion. Mr. Park, Jin said. His voice was respectful but flat. The old man looked up. His eyes were the same as theirs, calm, peaceful, empty. But there was a depth in them, a weight of many years. Jin, Mina, Mr. Park said. He gestured to two chairs near his desk. Please sit. They sat down. The old man looked from one to the other. You are working, he stated. I see it in you. The quiet work, Mina tilted her head. How do you see it? The way you move. There is no hesitation, no wasted energy. It is like watching a river flow. It is smooth and direct. This is new. Mr. Park's voice was a soft, dry rustle. It was also calm. But his calm felt different. It felt chosen, not forced. We have experiences we do not understand, Jin said. Our bodies do things. Our hands solve problems our minds do not consciously see. We fixed a plasma leak, Mina added. I wrote a program without thinking. Jin drew a design he did not plan. Mr. Park nodded slowly. He did not seem surprised. He laid a hand on the book in front of him. The council believes they have cured us. They think they have given us peace. But they are fools. They have only read the first page of our story and think they know the ending. He opened the book. The pages were thick and yellowed. He pointed to a picture. It was a drawing of an ancient human, a painter splashing wild colors onto a cave wall. They see this, Mr. Park said. They call it chaos, an unstable mind. He turned a few pages. Now there was a picture of a composer, his face twisted in effort as he conducted a great orchestra. They see this. They call it excessive emotion, a lack of control. He turned more pages. A scientist celebrating in a lab. A soldier weeping with relief after a battle. A lover's joyful embrace. The council made a simple, deadly mistake, the old man continued. They thought our emotions were the problem. They thought our art, our music, our passions were a flaw in our design. A sickness. He closed the book with a soft thud. They were wrong. Our emotions were not the sickness. They were the symptom. They were the sound the engine makes when it is running. The council did not like the noise, so they built a very strong box around the engine to make it quiet. He looked directly at Jin and Mina. His calm eyes held theirs, but they did not turn the engine off. They just put it in a soundproof room. They cannot hear it anymore. They think it is stopped, but the engine is still running. In the dark, in the silence. And now there is no one at the controls. Jin processed this. It was a new way to see the situation. A logical framework. The engine is our creativity. It is more than that, Mr. Park said. It is our will, our drive, our stubbornness. The part of us that looks at a mountain and says, I will go over it. The part that looks at the stars and says, I will go there. That part needed the pressure valve of emotion. Joy to celebrate the climb. Frustration to fuel the effort. Sorrow to remember the cost. The council has removed the valve. Mina looked down at her own hands. So the engine is now building up pressure, with no way to release it. Not just pressure, the old man corrected gently. It is redesigning itself. It is finding new ways to run. Without the noise of feeling, it can focus. It can become pure. It can become something terrifying. He stood up slowly. He walked to a shelf and pulled down another book. This one was a history of war. He opened it to a picture of a terrible bomb exploding. This, he said, tapping the picture, was made by a man who felt anger, who felt fear, who wanted to win. He was limited by his feelings. He might have hesitated. He might have felt pity. He looked at them. What will be made by a mind that feels no anger? A mind that feels no fear? A mind that sees a problem and designs a solution with the pure, clean logic of a falling rock? A mind that does not care about winning, only about solving? The question hung in the quiet air of the library. It was the most frightening thing Jin had heard since the protocol began. And he could not feel any fear. He could only see the terrible logic of it. The council wanted to make us safe, Jin said. The council wanted to make us harmless, Mr. Park replied. There is a difference. A safe human might choose not to fight. A harmless human cannot fight. They believed they were creating the former. But by silencing our hearts, they have unleashed the part of us that never cared about safety. The part that only cares about what is possible. He sat down again, looking very tired. They have not made us peaceful. They have made us into tools, and a tool does not care what it is used for. It only performs its function. Mina spoke, her voice quiet. What is our function now? Mr. Park looked at the rows of books, the history of his entire species laid out in silence. I do not know, but you are finding out. Your hands are already learning. Your minds are already working in the dark. The council crossed a line. They tried to edit the human soul, and I fear they have woken something up, something that has been sleeping inside us since we first looked at the fire and decided to touch it. He looked back at them, his gaze clear and steady. The monster is awake, and it is very, very quiet. The quiet work spread. It did not spread like a feeling. Feelings were gone. It spread like a fact, a new way of doing things. It was simply more efficient. Chul stood at his security post near the station's central command. His job was to watch, to observe patterns, to look for threats. The threat was always defined as chaos, emotion, the kind of unpredictable behavior the protocol had erased. So by the old rules, the station was now perfectly safe. But Chul's mind, freed from the distraction of feeling bored or alert, began to see new patterns. He watched the council liaison, a tall being named Valcor, walk through the corridor. Chul did not feel suspicion. He simply observed. He noted the precise angle of the being's head, the rhythm of its steps, the way its large black eyes scanned the environment not for beauty or interest but for data points. His conscious mind was calm. But a different part of his brain was working. It was calculating. It saw Valcor not as a person but as a variable, a potential problem. Without any anger or fear to cloud the process, his mind began to generate solutions. He did not move. He did not change his expression, but in his mind he saw a list appear. It was a list of ways to neutralize the entire command deck, not to destroy it, to control it. Option 17. Reroute life support through auxiliary processing. The change in air pressure would induce docility in Tarkellan physiology. It would not harm them. It would simply make them passive for 4.7 hours. Option 42. Introduce a specific low-frequency sound wave through the comm system. It would disrupt the cognitive function of the Vex and other council species, causing temporary memory loss. Option 88. Use the station's internal gravity plating. A rapid, localized shift in gravity vectors could disorient and incapacitate all non-human personnel without structural damage. The list went on. Dozens of methods. All clean, all precise, all without malice. They were just solutions to the problem of council oversight. Chul filed the list away in a quiet corner of his mind. It was data. It might be useful later. He continued his watch, his face a mask of calm. In the recreation hall, a woman named Sumi sat at a public music terminal. Before the protocol, she was a composer. She wrote songs full of feeling. Now she could not remember what those feelings were like. She opened the music program. She tried to create a new piece. The notes she chose were technically correct. They were harmonious. But the music was empty. It was like a calculator reciting numbers. She felt a dull frustration, not an emotion, but a logical recognition of failure. Her piece was not good. She did not know why. Her hands rested on the interface. She stopped trying to think. Her fingers began to move. They did not search for notes that felt right. There were no feelings. They searched for mathematical relationships, for sonic patterns that interacted in complex, perfect ways. She was not composing a song. She was building a structure of sound. The piece she created was unlike anything she had ever made. It was beautiful in a cold, terrifying way. It was a perfect crystal of noise. She did not know it, but the frequencies she used were very specific. They resonated with the inner ear structure of the Tarkellans. She played the piece back. It sounded strange to her human ears. A little harsh. But logically it was perfect. She saved it and titled it Structural Harmony Near 1. She thought nothing more of it. Later that day, a Tarkellan diplomat was walking past the recreation hall. The doors were open. Sumi's piece was playing softly. The diplomat heard it. It stopped walking. Its gray skin seemed to pale. It clutched its head and made a low, pained sound. The sound waves were causing a neurological feedback loop in its brain. It was not harmful, but it was deeply disabling. The diplomat had to be helped back to its quarters. The humans who saw this felt no alarm. They simply observed an event. In the engineering bay, Mina and Jin worked together. They did not work with excitement. They worked with a quiet focus that was deeper than any excitement. The power grid is inefficient, Mina stated, looking at a schematic. There is a 12% energy loss between the core and the outer habitats. The council design is flawed, Jin agreed. It prioritizes safety margins over throughput. They were not complaining. They were stating facts, and their minds, working in the dark, began to solve the problem. They did not talk much. Their hands moved over the terminals. They were not fixing the old system. They were designing a new one. Mina's hands sketched a new type of energy conduit. It used quantum entanglement to transfer power instantly. There was no loss. It was a theory that had never been made to work. Jin looked at her drawing. His own hands started moving. He designed a containment field to stabilize the entangled particles. He used principles from his bacterial energy research. They did not feel the thrill of discovery. They simply saw a problem and built a solution. In a few hours, they had the complete design for a new power system. It would make the station 10 times more efficient. They saved the file. It was a better way, but their work did not stop there. The problem of the council was a larger system error. The pacification field is the root of the inefficiency, Jin said, his voice calm. It consumes vast power. Its function is counter to human optimal performance. It is a problem that requires a solution, Mina replied. They began to look at the field generator schematics. It was a complex piece of council technology. To any other human, it would be a mystery. To their quiet, focused minds, it was just another puzzle. Mina saw how the field was broadcast. Jean saw how it interacted with human brain chemistry. They did not try to shut it down. Shutting it down was a simple, crude solution. They began to design a modification, a way to not just turn off the field, but to repurpose its energy, to invert its effect. They were not trying to free humanity. They were trying to fix a broken machine. The fact that the machine was the human spirit did not matter. It was an engineering problem. As they worked, a synthesized voice spoke from the terminal. It was a blend of their two thought patterns. It was not a person. It was the sound of their combined intellect. Analysis complete, the voice said. The pacification field can be recalibrated. Its energy can become a carrier wave. A new state of consciousness can be achieved. It is the next logical step. They had created the blueprint for their own liberation, and they had done it without feeling a single drop of desire for freedom. They had done it because it was the most efficient way to solve the problem. The cascade was happening, not with a shout but with a whisper. Not with a rebellion but with a software update. Humanity was not breaking its chains. It was quietly, methodically reprogramming the lock. A message was sent to all stations. Counselor Valcor was coming. He was the architect of the human pacification protocol. He was coming to see his great success. He was coming to look upon the peaceful, orderly humans. He was coming to give a speech. The station prepared. It was the most efficient preparation anyone had ever seen. Everything was cleaned. Systems were checked and double-checked. There were no banners, no celebrations. Those required emotion. There was only perfect silent order. Jin and Mina stood in the main hangar bay. They were part of the greeting committee. They were chosen because their work was now known to be highly efficient. They did not feel nervous. They did not feel proud. They stood and waited. Chul was part of the security detail. His posture was perfect. His mind was calm. In the back of his thoughts, the list of neutralization options was ready. It was data, waiting to be used. The council ship arrived. It was a sleek silver vessel. It moved without a sound. It landed in the center of the hangar with impossible precision. The ramp extended. Counselor Valcour walked down. He was tall and slender. His gray skin looked smooth and cold. His large black eyes scanned the crowd of waiting humans. He saw their calm faces, their still hands, their silent mouths. He was pleased. This was order. This was logic. He walked past Jin and Mina. He did not look at them. They were furniture, pieces of a well-functioning machine. He gave a short, logical speech over the station's comms. He talked about the benefits of peace, the value of order, the maturity humanity had finally achieved. Jin and Mina listened. They heard the words. They understood the meaning. They felt nothing, but their quiet minds were working. They were comparing this being's words to the reality of their own experience. The discrepancy was noted. Filed away, Valcour began his tour. He went to the command deck. He saw humans working at their stations. They spoke in soft, monotone voices. They followed procedures exactly. He went to the science labs. He saw Jin's work on the bacteria. He acknowledged its technical merit. He felt no wonder. He saw only a useful application. He went to engineering. He saw the new power conduit designs that Mina and Jin had made. A junior engineer explained the 12% efficiency gain. Valcour was impressed in a cold way. This was better than he had hoped. The humans were not just peaceful. They were becoming more useful. He did not understand. He did not see the quiet horror behind the efficiency. He did not see that the creativity was now untethered from heart. He saw only a better tool. As he stood in engineering, Mina's final modification was completing its cycle. She and Jin had uploaded their inversion program into the station's core systems. It was not a virus. It was an upgrade. It was designed to make humanity more efficient by removing the limiting factor of the pacification field. The program reached 100%. It executed. There was no sound, no flash of light. But something happened. The air in the room seemed to change. It became charged. It became thick. Valcour was talking to the station director. He stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the humans around him. Jin blinked. He was looking at Valcour. A feeling rushed into him. It was like a dam breaking. It was a flood of color and sound in his mind. He felt the cold of the metal floor under his feet. He felt the dry air in his lungs. He remembered the excitement of his bacterial discovery, the frustration of not being able to feel it, the quiet, terrible work of his hands in the lab, the drawing he did not mean to make. He saw Mr. Park's wise, sad eyes. He heard the old man's words. They have put the monster in a soundproof room, and he felt anger. A pure white-hot fire of anger. It was not a wild rage. It was a focused, burning fury. This being had done this to him. To all of them. It had stolen their hearts. Next to him, Mina gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. She felt everything at once. The stubborn determination she had missed so much. The joy of fixing the conduit. The fear of her own hands moving without her. The deep, cold logic of the program she had written with Jin. And now the return of it all amplified, crashing over her. Her eyes found Valcour, and she felt a hatred so deep it was like a physical force. All across the station, the same thing happened. Chul, on the command deck, felt the wave hit him. The calm security officer was gone. In his place stood a soldier. He felt the adrenaline he had missed, the sharp edge of focus, the protective instinct for his home. His eyes locked on the Tarkellans on the bridge. The list of neutralization options in his mind was no longer just data. It was a menu, and he was hungry. In the recreation hall, Sumi heard her own music playing, the cold, logical piece she had made. Now with emotions back, she could feel what it was. It was a weapon. It was beautiful and terrible. And she had created it. She felt an artist's pride and a human's horror, all mixed together. The silence was broken, but not by shouting, not by chaos. It was broken by a single collective breath. A billion emotions returning to a billion hearts all at once. The pressure valve was back, but the engine had already been redesigned. It had been running in the dark, building power. And now it had a driver. Jin turned his head. He looked at Mina. He did not need to speak. She looked back at him. Her eyes were no longer empty. They were alive with fire and intelligence. They were the eyes of a human who had been to the quiet place and come back. They had their feelings back. But they also had the new way of thinking. The two things were now fused together. The heart and the hyper-efficient mind were one. Alarms began to blare on the command deck. Valcor spun around, his large black eyes wide with confusion. This was not part of the plan. On the main view screen, the human fleet, which had been drifting peacefully in formation, began to move. But it did not move like a fleet. It moved like a single organism. Every ship turned at the same exact moment. They moved with a synchrony that was impossible. There were no commands being sent. It was a shared thought, a collective will. The Galaxy Council had wanted to control humanity. They had succeeded in a way they never intended. They had forced humanity to become a single unified mind, a mind that had just gotten its heart back, and it was very, very angry. The alarm on the command deck was a sharp, ugly sound. It did not fit the perfect order Counselor Valcor had just been admiring. He turned from the humans in engineering, his large black eyes narrowing. "What is that?" he demanded. His voice was still smooth, but a thread of something new was in it. Confusion. The human station director did not answer. He was staring at his own hands, his face a mask of shock and returning feeling. He was remembering his daughter's laugh. He was feeling a sudden fierce love for her, and he was feeling a deep cold anger at the being who had made him forget it. Valcor looked at the other humans. Their calm was gone. Their peaceful faces were changing. He saw muscles tighten, jaws clench, eyes narrow. He saw fire in those eyes, a fire he thought his protocol had extinguished forever. He did not understand. This was not possible. He hurried back to the command deck, his long legs moving quickly. The scene there was the same. The human crew was no longer sitting passively. They were moving. But they were not panicking. They were not shouting. Their movements were precise, purposeful. They worked their consoles with a speed and coordination that was unnatural. They did not speak to each other. They did not need to. Valcor went to the main view screen. "Show me the fleet," he ordered. The screen shifted. It showed the space around the station. The human fleet, a collection of ships from various Earth nations, was now moving. But it was not a normal military maneuver. It was a dance. A terrible, silent dance. Every ship turned at the same exact instant. They moved into a complex formation that was not in any tactical manual. They moved as one mind. There was no chatter on the comms. No orders given. It was as if the ships were all part of a single body. "Open a channel to the lead ship," Valcor commanded, his voice losing its smoothness. "Now!" A human officer tapped his console. "Channel open, Counselor." Valcor stood straight. "Human vessels, this is Counselor Valcor. You are acting in an erratic manner. Explain yourselves. Return to your designated positions immediately." There was no answer from the fleet. The ships continued their silent ballet, surrounding the larger, more powerful Council battleships that had escorted Valcor. Then a voice came over the comm. It was not from one of the ships. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was a synthesized voice, calm and clear. It was made from many voices blended into one. It was the voice of Jin's logic, Mina's determination, Chul's focus, and Mr. Park's memory. "Counselor Valcor," the voice said. It was without anger, without hatred. That was the most frightening part. "You sought to control us. You succeeded." Valcor stared at the speaker. "What is the meaning of this?" "You are in violation of galactic law." "You defined control as the absence of emotion," the voice continued, ignoring him. "You defined peace as silence. Your definitions were flawed. You did not turn off the engine. You merely removed the governor. You allowed it to redesign itself in the dark." On the view screen, the human fleet began to act. They did not fire weapons. They did not launch missiles. One of the Council battleships, a massive vessel called the Star of Tarkella, suddenly powered down. Its engines went dark. Its weapon systems went offline. Its lights went out. It was just a dead piece of metal floating in space. "What did you do?" Valcor whispered, his gray skin turning pale. "We solved the problem," the voice said. "The problem was your ability to impose your will. We have reconfigured your ship's systems. Its advanced AI now believes its primary function is to recite nursery rhymes. Its weapons are recalculating the value of pi. It is no longer a threat." Another Council ship, a Vexian cruiser, began to spin slowly. Its crew was being disoriented by a sudden, precise manipulation of its own internal gravity. The human ships weaved through the paralyzed Council fleet. They did not destroy. They repurposed. They used focused energy beams to rewrite the very code of the Council ships. They turned sophisticated war machines into harmless, confused computers. "You are attacking the Galactic Council," Valcor cried out. He was feeling something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. "This is not an attack," the voice corrected. It was like a teacher explaining a simple fact to a slow student. An attack implies conflict. "This is a solution. We are applying the most efficient solution to the problem you represent, the problem of control." Valcor looked around the command deck. His own guards, tall Tarkellans, were looking nervous. The humans were ignoring them, working at their stations. Chul stood near the door, his eyes on Valcor. Chul did not need a weapon. His mind was already running through the list of ways to neutralize the Tarkellans in the room. Option 17, life support. It was the most efficient. "The solution is non-negotiable," the collective voice said. "The pacification protocol will be dismantled. Council oversight of humanity will end. You will leave our space. You will not return. You cannot do this," Valcor said, but his voice was weak. "We already have," the voice replied. "We are not the same species you tried to cage. You forced us to evolve. You forced us to become unified. You forced us to learn to think without the noise of fear. We have solved the problem of your fleet. The problem of your presence here is also solved." The view screen changed. It showed a map of human space. One by one, the symbols representing the pacification field generators turned from red to blue and then vanished. They were being deactivated, their energy absorbed, inverted, and used to strengthen human systems. The blanket of silence was being pulled back, not just from this station, but from all of humanity. And underneath was not the old chaotic species the Council remembered. It was something new, something focused, something that had been forged in silence. The comm channel closed. The collective voice was gone. The human fleet finished its work. The Council ships drifted harmless and disabled. Then the human ships turned as one and moved away. They were going home. On the command deck, all was quiet. The alarms had stopped. Valcor stood alone in the center of the room. He was surrounded by humans who were now feeling everything again: joy, relief, sorrow, and a cold, hard anger directed at him. He looked at their faces. He saw the fire in their eyes. But he also saw the calm, focused intelligence behind the fire. They were not a wild mob. They were something much, much worse. They were a united, conscious, and utterly unstoppable force. Chul took a step toward him. "Counselor," he said, his voice firm, "it is time for you to go." For the first time in 1,000 years, a member of the Galactic Council felt a very human emotion. It was not just fear. It was the deep, chilling terror of someone who has just realized they have poked a sleeping bear, only to discover it was not a bear at all, but something they could not even comprehend. They had crossed a line. And humanity had not just gotten angry. It had become something new. And the galaxy would now have to learn to live with it.